Okay, let's get started. Okay, so I've started, so I'm going to start up. So hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this small information session put on mostly by the Compass Project, which is a physics DEI initiative in the Berkeley Physics Department. And we're going to talk today about the REU and SURF summer research programs, which maybe you all have heard about, maybe you haven't, but whatever you've heard about, I'm going to try and reiterate it and make it very clear for everyone in the audience. And this is supposed to be something that happens over the summer of 2024, and applications for it are going to be coming up relatively shortly, their deadlines. So this is a great time as you're wrapping up your RRR week and finishing up your semester of exams to start thinking about what you might want to do over the summer, and this is one of those options. So today I will quickly progress the slides. There we go. Today I will talk just a little bit about an overview of REUs from just an administrative perspective. As you might realize, I'm a graduate student. I'm Joseph, a physics grad student, so I am not at all like someone who administers REUs, but I have known a lot about them as an undergrad and just want to get the feeling of what you should know they do, and then we'll turn it over very quickly. Once I do that, we'll turn it over quickly to panelists for a question and answer session for the next 40 or so minutes, because I want you all to just basically ask people who have done REUs or SURF programs. I'll use REU to probably say both of them, but these are research experiences for undergrads or Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowships that hopefully they can offer some more insight into what they did. But I'll ask you to kind of split up your questions, and I'll make sure to moderate them as either being about the experience themselves or about getting into an REU application process and such. We'll talk about that as it goes on. So the last thing I will say is I am recording this session, and I realize I'm recording this session and have not given a way to send it out later, but I will, upload the link somewhere and then I can send it out via the email chains that we sent out before. So I will be able to do that. If you are uncomfortable with being recorded, feel free to use the chat box, and I will, moderate questions through the chat box to be able to read them out. So cool. Without further ado then, let's just quickly go into what is a research experience for undergraduates program. So this is a program created by the NSF, the National Science Foundation, to help undergraduates gain hands-on experience with research. There are two kinds of experiences. One is that sites provide like an immersive summer research experience. So basically you go in and you're basically working in a lab, like the setting I'm in now, for 10 or so weeks. Or there's also something called a supplement, which is, in the case of Berkeley, would be like allow an individual professor with an NSF grant to get add-on funds to support local undergraduates. So the first one is more you travel to a different institution and do a bunch of work and research there. The other is that you would stay around Berkeley and join in. There are a couple key important differences. Programs that are intensive require participants to dedicate their whole summer, as I mentioned, but this is a whole summer where all you're doing is living and working in a research environment. And they generally require you to, relocate for that summer because of that. And then the supplemental more focuses on local students, as I mentioned before. Its work is often hourly and may just support an existing research relationship. And so what we'll focus here is about the summer REU sites applying to go to places that are not just at Berkeley. And NSF claims that this is the most successful program, or one of the most successful programs they've created. So it has a long track record of success. So REU sites in general, this is more administrative again, but basically there is a director and a co-director who organize faculty to ask them if they'd be willing to take on an undergraduate for a research project over the summer. Then they organize and request the funding, and they get a proposal, and then the sites will then focus on, a specific discipline. So I don't know, there's probably people from all departments here, but, physics, chemistry, earth and planetary sciences, or sub-department. And then they'll fund the science throughout the US. So there's REU sites everywhere. So that's all you have. Like, if you want to find out where those are, so then you have to go to a site, which for some reason the link is not showing up here. I'll see if it comes up later. I apologize.
Put it in the chat if you want. I have it up.
Thank you. Yeah, put that in the chat just in case I don't see it later. So in a summer REU program, what do you do? Well, there's a lot of variations, but usually what you do is you do about a 10-week in length full summer research project. So from start to finish, trying to get something done in the lab from learning skills and all that. And then, there's about 8 to 15 people who are usually in these REU classes. So you're usually among a general cohort of a small class that is doing a bunch of different research experiences. You're not all doing the same one like in one class. You usually are working one-on-one with a faculty or other people in a lab. The main activity is research. It's not a class. There is, for the whole summer, you're usually doing, full-time research work. And like I said, it's through a faculty member, but they've identified a research project for you to pursue. And then so you'll work with, the local people in the lab to do this sort of thing. And usually it's, a diverse group of people in terms of like research interests, the geography, where they come from. This is, the class itself is actually a very cool way to network. And yeah, and then, like I said, they'll take care of your housing for you. It'll be a great opportunity to make friends, just like kind of a regular college. And usually, there are regular activities like maybe a Python boot camp, there, some machine learning workshop, tours and social outings. So they have some standard things, but of course, you also have a bunch of things with good French. And then there's a presentation at the end of the program. So like a 20-minute talk and a poster session about what you've done, maybe a report if you're lucky, and sometimes a publication if your research work actually led to something that was published later. So what does the program provide in this case? So just once again, what is kind of the experience? What does it give you? They usually give you a great group of fellow students, but more importantly, a new chance to learn a new research, like a research skills and topics in a new environment, right? This is an environment that is completely alien. So it's something where you get a chance to kind of branch out and do something maybe different or maybe something similar. Depends on what you want to do. And learning from and contributing to a project that involves other researchers. The financials are nice in that they aren't free. Your work is being valued here. So usually the application, if you get accepted, you'll receive a stipend for the summer, somewhere around, this is probably old numbers. I apologize. I should have looked up. From somewhere around 5 to 6K, might be more like 6 to 7 now with these numbers were more back in 2019 when I first looked at this presentation. Should look that up. And your living costs, typically the housing and often the cost of some meals should be covered. And sometimes they even help with your travel to or from the site. So that is something to look into if you get accepted, but that is why it's competitive. Most sites are in the US, but there are some that kind of go abroad. One of them being like University of Michigan's program, which goes to CERN actually, so in Geneva. That's pretty cool. So, there's even a chance to study abroad. I'm saying a lot. Or you can be a confidence builder. So, it's something that can tell you, yes, this research is interesting, or maybe no, this research is interesting, or I just hate research altogether. But at least you get that experience in a 10-week design course rather than wasting time, trying to wait for a long time to be able to do research. So that's a good thing to remember, just like an internship. And this can help you in your graduate school admissions if that's your plan. It also just strengthens your CV for anything, honestly. Anyone would appreciate someone who can do research at any given capacity. And yeah, so, and as it can influence your future research directions. And this is I talked to Professor Wick-Haxton, and he gave a bunch of people when he was an REU student when he was an REU advisor, and some of his students who went on to become people who became professors or tenure track people that were just his REU students at some point. And so, it is cool that this is one step in that academic journey if that's something that interests you. And even if you're not interested in academics, it's still good to get that research experience if you can. Okay. I realize I've been talking this whole time and never asked if anyone could hear me, but I'm assuming since no one stopped me, we're doing okay. All right, so let's wrap this up relatively quickly because I want to get to the panelists. So if you want to find a summer research REU program, here's that link. I knew I put it somewhere. There's a website that has a bunch of REU opportunities, and I encourage you, maybe not this week, but while you're sitting around at home for the holidays, maybe going and perusing on some interesting research topics you might want to pursue. There's a bunch of possible interests, like I'm talking from a physicist point of view. I looked at a lot of different like material science, chemistry, astronomy. It's a chance to try something slightly different if you want. Or maybe if you're coming from EPS and you've always wondered, what is it like to actually be a chemist rather than someone who studies chemistry in like the atmosphere? This is a chance to do that sort of thing. So, and sites can be changed around all the time, but definitely check for January and February is when there'll be updated new sites and such like that. And there's, there'll be some applications instructions, and we'll go over more of that in detail, but typically it's a transcript, a personal statement saying like, this is why I want to do research, so on and so forth, and then 2 reference names that will give you reference letters. So you need like 2 letters of reference. That's not too many. And then there's also other things it's called Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowships, which go under a different name, but they can be somewhat similar in that you're working over the summer in a research environment. And sometimes these are not barred from international students. REUs are usually domestic. You usually have to have a US citizenship or at least some sort of permanent citizenship, permanent status, whereas a SURF program is necessarily something where you can do as an international student. So you have to check, of course, for the different SURFs, whether they're things that are offered for stipends, but just as another point, they're relatively similar in that they kind of have a overarching class that gets admitted, and then you work with a research faculty member. Okay, so once again, how does one apply? We'll just finish with this, and that is, a good month to apply is January. That's why we're having this now, is because we want you to be thinking about it early. And it gives you references sometimes to respond if you can start, over the end of your holidays to kind of figure this out. Because as soon as the semester hits, all hell breaks loose and what's going to happen. RU programs are, like I said, generally open to only US citizens and permanent residents. The best opportunity to apply is the summer after junior year is what they claim. But I think that people get into RUs at any point in their track. I've known people who've gotten in their sophomores, their freshman year. So it doesn't hurt to apply. And they are very competitive. So you can apply to several places would be the way to go. And yeah, and as I said, consider going somewhere else. This is a chance to go somewhere else for just 10 weeks and then come back and decide what you think. And yeah, the most important thing probably is that personal statements are important. NSF is really big on diversity, and it is an RU goal to like make it known that they're supporting scientists, people who want to do science. So you should use your personal statement to your advantage in order to do that. And one last thing I'll say for people at Berkeley specifically is that there is some advantages and disadvantages to come from Berkeley. One is that Berkeley, you have a lot of resources and that, so this is a good thing, but also they might assume you have research advantages in that you have access to all these research opportunities. And remember, this site, NSF has built this to be like people from maybe a smaller college or a place that isn't well, like R1 funded, that they can still go and get research experiences. So that might be a disadvantage, but you should emphasize any reason the program could pick you. So like why this program would still positively impact you. Maybe something, Berkeley is not where you want to do all your research. You want to try something else, or you have other options. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that if anyone who did an REU has that sort of experience. Or, you're a new transfer student or other sorts of reasons this could happen. And then, yeah. And so the unified acceptance dates, there's a generally in the first week or second week of March is when you would be able to hear like, I got an REU or I didn't, so that you can start making your summer plans. And what if you don't get an REU? Well, there's plenty of options. There's programs similar to REUs with many national labs. So this is something like the Summer Undergraduate Laboratory Internship. So you could just apply to a bunch of labs, national labs. We have a couple of them around Berkeley, actually. And so you could check out this website for those. You could also talk about the REU supplements. So finding paid research in Berkeley with an REU supplement might be a way to help fund your research you'd like to do over the summer. And so that is another option. And then finally, there's another Blur program associated with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, which has a similar strategy: build a research relationship with a mentor like an RU supplement, and then you can apply to Blur, which gives you, once again, some sort of housing stipend and a stipend to work for 10 weeks. So yes, so that is all I have. And I think I finished on time. Hell yeah. All right, so this gives us plenty of time for questions. So basically I want the panelists to have to introduce themselves, just, maybe, your name, your year, a little bit about yourself if you want to include something like, and then maybe the last thing is you should talk about your REU, like where'd you go, what'd you do, and just do that maybe in like a couple sentences if possible. And then from there, we'll move it over to questions for the audience. I encourage you to raise your hand or to type in the chat, and I will field your questions, whichever one you feel comfortable with. But please remember that I'll try and keep it to the first, 20 minutes being about the REU itself, talking about the experiences, and then we'll switch over to actually the questions about getting in. So, okay, so why don't I hand it off to one of the panelists to introduce themselves, if you don't mind. Make sure you state yourself known. Who would like to go first?
I can go. I'm Rhea. I'm a third-year undergraduate student here at Berkeley. I'm majoring in applied math and minoring in physics. I did an REU program over the summer at the University of Washington in Seattle. It was actually the one that you saw on the very first slide. That was the one I did. And I did a project. I worked with a very interdisciplinary group in biophysics, and I worked on characterizing the immune system makeup of COVID-19 patients from like a statistical physics and math point of view.
I can go next. My name is Rav. I use the she, her pronouns. I'm a fourth year and I'm majoring in astrophysics and music. This past summer, I did an astronomy REU at Harvard, the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. And there I worked on analyzing Chandra X-ray light curves in search of transits that are indicative of candidate exoplanets outside of our galaxy. And I'm currently working on constraining the parameters of a specific event that I found during the REU, the possibility of the X-ray binary being a three-body system.
I guess I can go next. My name is Troy. I'm a third-year physics major. I did an REU over the summer, last summer, at Purdue in Indiana. I worked on quantum sensing, like experimental quantum sensing. Yeah.
My name is Donnie. I'm a PhD candidate in physics here at Cal. I did a few REU programs, or I did a couple of REU programs as an undergrad, and I think that they were beneficial into helping me get into graduate school here. So I can talk about those. I did one actually here at Cal after my sophomore year. And then after my third year, I did a program with the Harvard School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, a 10-week program there. Yeah.
And I am Ivan. I use he, him pronouns. I am a fourth year PhD student in physics, and I work understanding quantum chromodynamics, which is a theory of protons and neutrons and gluons and quarks and mesons and all those beautiful things, both from the point of view of classical and of quantum computers. And I did a SURF program back in 2017 at Caltech, working on characterization of some infrared sensors that were sent on the James Webb Telescope, and then we'll be going on Roman to do weak gravitational lensing in dark matter searches. And yeah, I'm really happy to talk about that. And I am not American. I am from Colombia, so I'm also happy to talk about opportunities for non-US citizens. Yeah.
So yeah, I open up the floor to questions. If you're going to ask a question in the chat, please use the Q&A box. Otherwise, feel free to raise your hand and we will try and get to you. Otherwise, you guys are going to have to hear my questions that I've pre-prepared, and those probably won't be nearly as beneficial.
Could we maybe like reduce the screen size or like,
Oh,
stop?
is it too big?
I don't know if it's just on my end or
Let me try. Is that okay? Let's see.
I think it's probably just my view. That's fine.
Yeah, I can also probably just stop sharing. I don't think there's anything beneficial on there. So unless there's something I need to pull up. So, all right. Anyone have questions to ask? Or otherwise I will pick my favorite one. All right, so first question is, like I said, we're trying to talk about experiences, but we'll at least answer this one, which is it possible to apply for an REU as a US citizen, but not studying at a university in the US? So
Yes. No. I
so
think all they ask is if you're a US citizen, and they'll just confirm that. I don't know that they necessarily where you're studying.
yeah, but the most of the NSF REU programs are funded for inside the US. Like it's National Science Foundation, which is a US institution. So like CERN is one of the very few ones where they allow you to go, I think, anywhere else. I think everyone who talked here, everyone studied in the US for their REU, right? No one.
Oh, do you mean like doing your undergrad in the US or going
The
to
REU being at a
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Sorry. My apologies. Okay. I have not faced this actually, so I don't exactly know, but I assume you can. It just requires you to be a citizen. I don't think they actually and be enrolled at a university, but I should check. So yeah, I'm trying to stick with, yeah, it seems like a lot of people have application questions. We could switch it up and do application questions first, but let's see. Yeah, I should check that out. Does anyone know of someone who studied abroad, but then came for an NSF REU? No? Okay. Based on our experience, no. And check on the website. I checked on the website. I'll check that and try and answer it more closely. Meanwhile, Jacob, did you have a question?
Hello. Yes,
I just wanna, wait,
Oh.
Jacob, sorry. I just want to clarify that I feel like the general answer from everyone here is that common sense says that it should be fine for you to apply as a US citizen, even if you don't study in the US. Like it should be fine. NSF shouldn't. What should matter is that you will also be studying as an undergrad at the end of your REU experience. But it probably doesn't matter where you're an undergrad. It probably only matters that you're American. That's what the NSF would care about. Sorry, Jacob, that I interrupted you.
no worries. So I suppose my question involves the topic that we'll be researching. I was wondering if we should come up with certain ideas that we would be interested, because I know some certain programs, you have more free range to come up with topics that you would like to research. So I was wondering if we should expect that for most REUs or the SURF program. And this is just to basically all the panelists. Thank you.
I can start by saying that I think it's definitely good to mention in your personal statement what your interests in research are, if you know what they are. But in my experience, so Harvard has 2 astronomy REUs. One is astronomy and one is solar astronomy. I went for the astronomy one, which had like a bunch of different topics, and they did not publish the topics in advance, and they didn't let me pick which one I wanted either. They gave me 2 options and I could pick between 2, but that was it. And some people didn't get a choice, but I know other programs I applied to had like lists of possible topics. So it can depend, but that was my experience.
At my REU, they had a huge list of projects, and so I had said in my application I'd like to work with Professor so-and-so on this project, but they did let people sort of come in with their own ideas. There was one person in my REU who had contacted a professor who like wasn't on the initial list and was able to work with him while still getting the REU funding. So my side at least was open to students suggesting their own ideas, or if they could find a professor who wasn't technically on the list, but still willing to work with them. They were willing to do that. But usually what I've seen is that they have like a list of predetermined projects that students get assigned to.
I guess I can. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can add maybe my experience because for Purdue's it was less cut out like for the projects, and so on the application you kind of have to look. Different programs will say like, oh, here are the specific projects you're applying to, and then other ones will be more like just say the things you're interested in. They're definitely not expecting you to come up with a fully fledged research project that you design. It's more like you put your information down and then they'll pair you with the advisor that they think aligns most with your interests. So maybe leaning a bit on application tips is like take a look at the faculty that actually work at that university and see what kinds of things they do, and see if you can try to find like which faculty have worked with REU students in the past, because they will most likely be doing it again.
Yeah, so between my two experience I had, they were slightly different. The one that I did at Berkeley was part of the Cal Nerds program, which is another one of the many summer research programs. From there, I had to actually contact faculty ahead of time or contact people who were doing there were a list of people who were doing research who were affiliated with Cal Nerds. And I contacted someone directly to see if they were willing to work with me, and it worked out. When I did the Harvard REU, there was a part of the application where they said to pick like your top 5. This was a pretty large REU program. This one had about I think 80 students in total. And so and it was the entire School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, which covers many disciplines. And so they wanted us in the application to mention 5 faculty from the list of faculty, but then also in the personal statement, it was important to kind of outline like who I would want to work with and why and everything. Oh, and I should say I didn't. And then when I got in, they told me who I was working with after that. So.
Cool. Anything else to say on that topic? Hey, this is kind of a tangential question that was sent in the chat, which was how many REU did you apply to and how many did you get into? So just off the topic of, we're talking about the ones that we did get into. How many did you apply to though? Just out of number, curious.
I guess I can go first again. I applied to 15, I think. I got into 2 and 1 off the wait list. So initially they told me I was waitlisted and then I got in later. So eventually it ended up being 3 out of 15. But I encourage people to apply to as many as possible because they're very selective. And so I got accepted to 3, but some of them I never even heard back from. Like I got rejected from a few of them. But sometimes like rejections will roll out later than the initial acceptance date, which is usually around March 1st. And so you would be like waiting for weeks to get rejected from some places, and some places I think I never even heard back from. So yeah.
I will say I know people email and to find out about the status of their application. So like I had the same experience where like some of the sites I applied to just didn't get back to me. Which is a rejection, of course, but it's kind of nice to hear that. So I would say like if it's like maybe the end of March or something, you've given them a few weeks, maybe you can email them. But yeah, I had applied to I think 7 and I got into 1. So yeah, it is very competitive. And then I was also applying as a sophomore. So I think that can get harder. And I definitely still apply, but just I think don't be discouraged if you don't get in, because they're very hard to get into.
Yeah, I applied to 10 or 12, got into 2. But I think I got into both of these like way later than the so-called initial deadline. So I feel like I was actually on an internal wait list, and then they eventually took me off. So don't lose hope early on if you don't get it on March 1st, because like, I mean, there are a lot of strong students, and a lot of strong students will get into a lot of the same REUs, but they can only pick one. So the wait list is always huge. Yeah.
And I'll just add to that these things you can contact the, like head person. Like if you're like really have two things to do this summer, like, oh, I could do an REU or I could take this really cool internship. You can like let the college know, like, hey, I'm considering this. Can you give me an update on my status? That'll at least like you don't have to sit there blind. They'll talk to you. All right, sorry, you continue with the.
I don't remember how many I applied to because it was a long time ago, but I want to say it was close to 10 for the I remember for the round where I got into the Harvard REU, I got into 3. Harvard was the third one I heard back from, but it was around 10-ish that I applied to.
So one thing, yeah. So one question that kind of goes off of this was asked in the chat, which was about being an international student. So REU is not really designed for any. So like we said, REUs are not really designed for international students. So is there any way to check funding, or what is the SURF process? So maybe, I know everyone did that stuff, but Yvonne, you did a SURF program. So how did you like go about that sort of ordeal?
Yeah. So yeah, being an international student is harder because of like the systematized issues that we have around non-Americans here in the US. But the SURF programs, and you see, when we say REU, we mean like I got this idea that we mean like a very institutionalized thing. Like I think SURF is more of like a generic name that different places give to different programs that they do for undergraduate research fellowships. And in particular, they don't have to be funding from NSF. So there are places like Caltech. Caltech is the place that I know the best because that was the place that I went to, where the application process is completely open to everyone, regardless of whether they're American or not, except if you want to go work for the Jet Proportional National, like the JPL, for the Jet Propulsion National Lab, because it's a national lab. But yeah, the process is very much like other REUs in that they have a list of mentors with possible projects, and that gives you an initial idea. Okay, like maybe I can contact this person to express my interest in whatever they're doing. Or you can also build your own thing. Like you can also look at the faculty that they have, and if you're interested with working with somebody in particular, you can contact them. But yeah, contacting is usually the first step, because to apply, I actually think that you need a recommendation letter from a faculty member at Caltech in order to apply. So you have to contact them to make it happen. And yeah, the opportunities are, I mean, that's just the reality. The opportunities for research experiences for non-Americans are more reduced, but there are some opportunities. So just looking right now, I found that Stanford, the engineering department, also has a SURF program that is open to international students as well. And even if you're not an engineer, so in my case, for example, I did my SURF, even though I am a physicist, my SURF was in experimental physics, and it was really in engineering. I was doing engineering during the time that I SURF. So also like branching out into different areas to like just try to accommodate into finding something that will work for you might be a good idea for the international students out there. I really wish that I could provide more experience about like give a really big array of opportunities for internationals, but I really don't know. I only know my experience, and my experience was very different from everyone here. I did not apply to 10 research experiences. I had the good luck of having somebody that was at Caltech whose advisor wanted to do a surf program, and that person that was a postdoc back then was Colombian, so he went to Colombia specifically trying to find a Colombian student that would be interested in working, and I happened to be taking quantum mechanics with his best friend at the moment, and my quantum mechanics professor then suggested that I apply to it, and I think I ended up being the only person that applied to it, and that's why they accepted me. So yeah, it's a different experience. But yeah, highly recommend to anyone that is international to look into Caltech or Stanford, or to just do a search to see what sort of surf programs allow for international students to apply. But yeah, it will require more work on your behalf to find those.
Cool. Thank you for offering that piece of advice. I think we'll move on a little bit to, there's two questions about letters of recommendation. So one of the questions is, are there any tips for acquiring letters of recommendation? The second one is that, requiring the letters of recommendations, how important are they for the viability being, if I want to ask a math professor for a letter of recommendation, but I want to apply to a physics REU, is that going to be hold me back? Should I make sure to grab someone from physics? So Ivan's already shaking his head. Maybe you want to start with that, Ivan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I feel like at the level of an undergrad, the most important thing for the letters of recommendation is to find people that really like you. It doesn't really matter whether they're like what field they're in. You just want to find people that can really vouch for who you are. You don't want to find people that necessarily are gonna say no, this person is an expert in microscopy. You want to find somebody that say this person is super dedicated and super fast at learning, and whatever challenges that you put in front of them, they're gonna go super fast. And my other recommendation would also be, if possible, and this is not possible for everyone, but if possible, try to find letters of recommendations that are not from graduate students. Try to find letters of recommendations from faculty. Graduate students will often be willing to write you a letter of recommendation, and will probably be a really good letter of recommendation because we have just been very close to that experience ourselves, but our word is just not as doesn't weigh as much as somebody that is a faculty member.
You can also have your, if you have a GSI you're very close to, and you can always contact the professor of that class and your GSI. And I had a GSI who was willing to send notes about me to a professor. They might be willing to, write up some paragraph about you that can be included in a letter. But yeah, just echoing what Ivan would say, you should really get letters from people who know you well, even if it means going with a math professor over a physics professor or something like that, because these people will be able to speak to how well you would do in a research setting and other soft skills like that, because it's not all about, and they're not going to expect you to have that much advanced content knowledge. They know you're an undergrad, but they really want to see that you can succeed in a research environment and that you want to be there.
Yeah,
It's a really
just
good idea to,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's a good idea if you haven't already now to start going to your professor's office hours to introduce yourself and getting to know them a little bit more one-on-one. That way, if you do well in their class, or if you want to ask for a letter of recommendation from them later on, they can put a name to a face.
Yeah, sorry, Ralph, before you go, I just wanted to echo on what Donnie just said. That is super key. You don't know how many great students I know, exceptional students, that because they were so good, they just never used office hours, and they never they got the best grades in every class, but nobody knew who they were because they never went to any single class and they only attended for the exams. So that part of getting to know, doing that sort of networking, that is super important. Yeah, so I just wanted to stress that. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I just wanted to add that, if you are looking for a second one, and it can especially be hard if you're a sophomore and you haven't taken that many upper division classes yet or anything like that. One of my letters was from the faculty advisor of ULab, which is a decal that I run. So they know me in that kind of capacity, not so much of an academic capacity, but I think it's still useful because I've worked with that professor. I've learned how to lead a group and teach and do things like that through that outreach. So if you do other activities where you have outreach or leadership or something like that, and you have a professor who's an advisor, that can also be a good option for a letter.
Can anyone just add to the first part of the question, which is, how, I guess we did talk a little about going around getting them. So I guess I'll surmise, basically make sure to get a relationship with, a professor or a GSI, be a decent student. And then that's a common person to ask. It's a lot harder when you cold call an email to someone you've never met before and say, can you write me a letter rec? It won't sound as authentic. Is that a good summary of what we said?
Also, ask early, make sure your recommenders have at least a month, but preferably more. So that means a lot of RUs are going to have deadlines. I think, if I remember correctly, February 15th, some perhaps even earlier. So I would ask at the very latest, the week you come back from school, from break, sorry. So at the beginning of next semester is a great time to ask, because that's the thing that you need to budget the most time for, because you can write your application and how many ever days spend some time on it, but you want to give your recommenders enough time.
Yeah, and actually my earliest deadlines were January 30th. So I would ask even beginning of January if you can, or check the programs that you're applying for and budget enough time. Also, I recommend when you're actually applying, start the application and send out the requests for the letters in advance, because they're gonna have to go through and submit individually to each program, and that takes a lot of time. So if it's possible for you to request the letters without turning in the application already, do that early so that they get those and can turn them in.
Honestly, I would ask now if you're applying for this summer. Earlier does not hurt. Sometimes they will say they're too busy, although that's pretty rare. Many times they just okay, I can write them in a month. And so it's good to know that. And sometimes they might want a list of programs you're applying to so that they can match up one by one all of the different million emails they get in their inbox. So ask now, I think, would be a good idea.
Something that was helpful for me, both for applying to REU programs and applying to graduate school, was making a spreadsheet if you're applying to multiple programs and you're getting your letter writer is writing for multiple programs, having a spreadsheet that has exactly which programs, what are the links for where to submit or how do you submit, what are the deadlines, what are the any other extra surveys they may have to fill out or whatever. Just make it as easy for them as possible. Your letter writers are super busy people. It takes a lot for them sometimes to dedicate, schedule some time to dedicate to this. So if you can make their process as easy as possible, that's usually a good idea.
One last letter thing before we move on, it's just a quick one, is someone asked how the effectiveness of postdocs letters match up with, we talked about grad students, professors, what about postdocs? Can just one person talk about that?
Yeah, I did research with a postdoc actually, so I did have a postdoc write my letter. I think it's fine as long as the person writing your letter is more than one level above you, if that makes sense. So you shouldn't have an undergrad should not have a grad student writing their letter, but a postdoc is okay because they're beyond that level. Also, you can, if you're doing work in a group or something like that, you can ask the PI to sign off on the letter too, even though the postdoc wrote it. So that'll give it more emphasis, I guess. But yeah, I think it's totally fine. I had a postdoc write one of my letters.
Okay, as long as no one has any complaints to that, I think we can move on to the next question, which is from an anonymous participant that they are a junior transfer student with limited research experience in applied math. And they're just wondering, what is a good way to start? Is it better to apply to Berkeley's own REU or try one outside at a different REU institution? I guess this is a little bit more of advice, but if anyone's from similar boats, any thoughts on this?
Okay, I guess I can go. I mean, it's one of those things where maybe don't worry about it so much. I think just kind of shoot your shot at a lot of opportunities and things will come. So, there are REU applications right now. So, naturally it's probably a good thing to shoot a few applications, because why not? And then later on, depending on exactly what department and stuff, there's like Berkeley opportunities, and those deadlines might be a little later. Shoot your shot there. I think it's just, if you want to do research, but you don't really have your foot in the door right now, then just kind of try both and then get options and then pick from there. That's my take on it.
Yeah, so maybe feel free to do both, look for research opportunities at Berkeley, look for some out, and just make sure to mention in that application that you're a transfer student, you just came, you're a junior, and you're trying to get research experience. This is your first chance.
There are REUs also that are like, different REUs have different goals, and there are some REUs that are like geared towards being students' first proper research experience. And so you can look at like the missions of different REUs and like what they've said about the types of students they're targeting, and see if there are some that maybe fit your background. And then like REUs in general, like Joseph was saying, like one of the goals is to increase like the diversity of backgrounds of people in science. And so you should definitely talk about, like, as a transfer student, this is something that I want to get into, but maybe I haven't had the opportunity before, or here are other ways that like my background I could like bring to a research experience. So I think you should still apply for sure. And then if you want to try doing it at Berkeley, like there's URAP, which will be next semester. You should also just cold email people you're interested in and ask to talk to them. But yeah, I think do all of the things that you want to do. I think you didn't count yourself out. Just apply to everything.
Kind of going off of that, I totally echo what Ria said, but I wanted to add that, the different goals thing is definitely true. Although sometimes people will, or RUs are marketed as like all of them are supposed to be a first research experience, but that's not always the case, because some of them will say, like we accept people even if they have no research experience, but some will say like we encourage people with no research experience to apply. And there's a little bit of a difference between those. Like I mean, the one that I did at Harvard, like they said that they accept people without research experience, but everybody in my cohort had already done research before, and actually most of them had already done REUs before as well. And so different programs are definitely geared toward different things. So look for specifically the ones that encourage people with no research experience to apply, because that's their mission. But yeah, just read the like goals and mission statement really carefully.
Cool. Yeah, quickly, there's a couple more questions I want to get to. So maybe we move on. And the one that is next, at least in terms of fluidity, is what if you apply to a program with a topic you're interested in but don't have experience in? What would that look like? Is this something that's common? Is there something you should do differently about your application? Any words of advice in terms of that?
Again, like I said, the program I applied to, they didn't really give us a list of topics anyways. I did still say what I was interested in, but then I got there and they had me doing X-ray astronomy, which I had never done before. It's more of a learning curve when you're working. So like the first couple weeks, it took me longer to kind of get in the groove of like producing useful work. But I mean, that's kind of what the REU is for. It's set up for you to learn. So that's why we have that time budgeted in. And a lot of like most people going into their REUs are going into a new research experience. That's kind of the point, to kind of give you something different from what you would have at your home institution. So you can get exposed to different areas of research. So I wouldn't worry about, if it's something you're interested in and you don't have any experience in it, they're there to teach you the stuff that you need to succeed in that. But yeah.
I will add to that, just that once again, I was never an REU student, but my freshman year I did research at my home institution, and I was with the REU incoming class, and I worked closely with an REU student who was a high energy experimental person and did biophysics research. And then someone else had come in with biophysics research background and they did like high energy physics research. So just as an idea of like, they're not really accepting you based on what you had done before, and they really just want you to get experience learning a technique. So I would say you should feel totally fine to say like, I'm interested in this topic, but I have no research experience in it. I don't think that's going to stop you.
And also, I don't know if this is your background, like for people that, I mean, it can be valuable to come from a different perspective. I think that that has just been true in my life in general. I've always ended up doing research in things that I did not prepare myself to do research in, and that has just made me way more valuable to the research groups because of that. So for example, when I was working at Caltech, my background was in theoretical physics, and that allowed me to build this code called distortionator. We call it distortionator back then, which was like a very mathematical, like inspired code in the theory, like in differential geometry, built to understand very well the distortion of this dark matter stuff and everything. And it ended up, and like now people use that code, like people that are working from James Webb Telescope data, and I feel like that's because of like that diversity of background that I had. I feel like that's true for a lot of people. So highlight the things you've done, even if they're not like directly related to the research that you want to do.
I would just like to add real quick the question in the Q&A about pi squared. So that's like the physics summer research program here. I did it between my freshman and sophomore year. So if you have any questions about that, maybe you'll share my email, or we can share emails at the end. I don't know, but I don't want to get too much into the specifics of that particular program, but feel free to ask me after.
I also did that program, so feel free to reach out to me as well.
Yeah. If you guys want to put your emails in the chat for Jason, that might be helpful for that. Those will be shared, but yeah. We still have just like 3 more-ish minutes if people have some last minute burning questions about REUs, or just to be clear though, pi squared program is open to international students, right? That's not something that's
I
domestic
think you
only.
just have to be a Berkeley undergrad, I think.
Yeah. So yeah. So just making sure that you know. Okay.
But it might be only intended physics or astrophysics majors. I'm not sure.
Okay. I think I'd like to end with one question if no one else is going to ask a question, which is
Joe, wait. If there is no question that is being asked, can I just comment on something real quick?
go for it.
I just wanted to comment that nobody asked about this, but I just wanted to mention that doing an REU or a surf program or whatever is a really cool experience. I just wanted to comment that out.
Yeah.
It is not, it is like on top of the research and everything, like the people you're gonna meet, you're gonna make friends that are gonna be your friends for your whole life. You're gonna live experiences that that are gonna be, that you're gonna be able to live because you're being paid, because you're like in a new place, because so it's a really cool life experience to do a research, like on top of like helping you fill out your CV and everything, like it's worth doing just because of like your personal growth. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, actually,
just the networking opportunities is like really great. Yeah, you meet friends. I have friends who are now professors or like assistant professors now, which is just mind-boggling to me because we were, undergrads doing research like for the first time together. And it's also for me, like I was born and raised in California. I've lived here my whole life. Living in Boston for a summer was a completely new experience for me. The humidity was very intense, but it was a good opportunity to see what it's like to live in a different state for a few months. So I highly recommend it if you have the opportunity to.
Yeah, maybe what I want to maybe finish around the panel. What is one experience you found super valuable from your REU experience? I got you, Yvonne, you kind of said one, Don, you kind of said one, I guess, but if you want to add something, feel free. Ray, Troy, Rav.
I think something, it might be kind of simple, but in our REU, all the interns sat in one room together with all our computers. And so whenever we would have a question, we would just turn around and ask each other. And like that environment, talking to like, they're my like lifelong friends now. We talk all the time. And so that environment of like getting to know people from all these different backgrounds and like just being able to talk and ask questions and, have different people are stronger at different things and helping each other out was just really amazing. And we got to go fishing together. So that was pretty fun.
I really enjoyed getting to experience living in Seattle, which is an awesome city. I loved the cohort of people that I did it with. All of them were super cool and they were like from all over the country. So it was really cool to get to meet a group of people that I wouldn't have been able to meet had I not done it. I think the biggest thing for me was getting to have a connection with my research group. I've really enjoyed working with my research group and I'm actually still working with them remotely. And I just made a really good connection with the graduate student I worked with and with the PI of that research group. And I'm getting some opportunities now to like go to conferences and perhaps like author a paper on my research and contribute to that. So I feel like in terms of like research and career development, it's been just such a good opportunity beyond the research I was already doing at Berkeley in terms of the opportunities I've gotten about my research and also just doing something I really enjoy.
Yeah, so I have two. I mean, one, I've never lived in the Midwest before, so that was an experience. The second thing, maybe this is a little cynical or something, but I learned what I don't want to do. And I think that is very valuable as an undergrad to learn things you don't want to do, especially when you probably have a lot of passions and a lot of things. I learned that I'm not sure if I can spend my entire life 8+ hours a day inside a dark lab with no windows. But that's something that I learned for myself. Some other people may really enjoy that, and that's you can't know until you do it. It's one thing to read about it, and it's another thing to actually do it. So that is probably the most valuable thing that I gained.
I'd say the most valuable, like the funnest part of my experience was going to Yosemite. That was a lot of fun with my friends, and you know what? No, the best part of my experience was after it was done. Like 2 years ago, I went to the wedding of a friend that I met back in 2017, and that was really special. That was really, really, really a special opportunity.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, it is 2 minutes past 4, so I think we're going to stop the recording. But thank you all for coming, and I will thank you all. Hopefully, if you have more questions, you can. I'll try and send out the link somehow. I think we might just put it on the YouTube channel if people are okay with that. Might be a good way to do it, but we'll see how we feel comfortable. And yeah, and if you have any more, yeah.
Website.
Yeah, exactly. But let us know. You should have my contact information if you have any questions in the future. So with that, I'm gonna at least stop the recording because now I'm just blabbering.